Hey guys, Mechanite here, and welcome to a new series I'm going to be starting called Gaming Ecosystems, where I take some locations from games and imagine what the ecosystem would be like. Today we're taking UB Plant from Pokemon, where the Ultra Beast Xurkitree resides. So first we're going to discuss the biology of Xurkitree. Now, I need to give some context first. A lot of these aren't going to be, official. You shouldn't take these as fact. This is just basically me theorising about it. Don't take it too seriously, basically. It's all just a bit of fun. So the context is that instead of orbiting your regular planet, which is of a burning gas, UB Plant is a planet that orbits the sun made up of entirely electrical energy. It's an anomaly for how it stays there and how it's not deteriorating or collapsing, but it sure does. So UB Plant is supercharged with electrical energy. It's, instead of plants, it is made up of grey rock-like structures and wire-like plants that form the ground. Xurkitree is an offspring of one of these plants, an evolutionary ancestor or relative. Xurkitree has an extremely thin layer of fat surrounding its wire-like skin, and it's made up of multiple creatures living symbiotically with each other. They're actually different creatures, and they almost kind of compete with each other, and they're all tendrils, but near the head, the tendrils split into imperceptibly small strands and wrap around each other to form a brain-like system that allows them to think with all the electrical energy coursing through them. Now, Xurkitree is a plant-like being. It's sort of a mix between a plant and an animal, but it does get food through photosynthesis. It has both an endo and exoskeleton, you can see with a large star thing on its head, which are crystals made from the byproducts of its photosynthesis. It photosynthesizes using the UV light from all the lightning constantly coursing through the clouds of the planet. It's almost like a machine in that it doesn't have lungs or a heart because it doesn't really need oxygen to be spread around the body. It uses electricity. Now, among it has this little tail thing that kind of comes from the back of its head. From that, there's a hidden hole in it that shoots out crystalline seeds that will grow into younglings that obviously don't have the protective helmet yet, as they don't have enough byproducts from the photosynthesis. They're usually rooted into the ground before they start to move around, and elders of the species have the central spike on the head which will grow out longer to show rank. It has patches of photosynthesizing cells around the extremely muscular forms of its wires. They're usually entirely solitary creatures, simply travelling across different areas of the planet, roaming wildly. And you see those claws on its tail and its feet. The ones on its feet will inject toxins from the next creature we'll talk about to use for self-defense by shooting out. Well, not shooting, but injecting the venom into other creatures that try to battle it. The next creature I'll make up, well, I guess I've already said it, but it's one that I made up for this video to explore this ecosystem a bit more. And it's extremely small, one of the main prey of the ecosystem. And this is the creature that the Xurkitree gets its defensive venom from. It's known as a Beetox. You can somewhat see a relation between it and Xurkitree, as they both have both endo and exoskeletons. This creature has a wooden bark-like exoskeleton, an alien plant that simply appears similar to ones found on Earth. It has both an endo and exoskeleton like this. Its muscles and bones are wooden, and instead of pushing like our muscles do, they will pull using hydraulics. I suppose it's a bit ironic that we're actually starting with the end of a Beetox's life. You see, the exoskeleton is more like a parasite that does actually end up being helpful, but is still not super helpful to the creature. So when the creature is getting older and knows it will die, it will go to the same place lots of others have gone to die. The roots will take it over and it will shrivel up into a grey-like structure. I thought that since the entire planet is basically made up of these wires that kind of overlap and are like a hive mind thing, the rock structures didn't actually make that much sense of that explanation I gave. So the rock structures are actually made up from dried out dead betoxes. It has an extremely underdeveloped brain since it don't really need it. It is a herbivore. It'll use these massive pincers that come from the side of its head to cut off parts of the planty wire surface of the planet to simply eat. A peculiar thing about it is that it doesn't have a top jaw, only a lower jaw. But obviously, since it uses hydraulics, that's not going to be a problem for it. Since it's an alien, you can't really categorize it into either mammal or insect. But instead of a heart or lungs, it has an organ that's a fusion of the both. But for simplicity's sake, I simply call it a heart. And instead of breathing in through the mouth, like most mammals would, similar to some insects, it takes in oxygen from the air around it using its exoskeleton to take into its heart to obviously help with its bodily functions. And you may be wondering, I haven't mentioned this guy's venom yet, but that's because it isn't really a venom. The Xurkitree can make it into a venom by adding in chemicals, some of the same ones that its cells contain, but for this creature, it's actually helpful. They release a liquid from their nostrils that heal the burns they might get on their pincers, since they're chopping off the wires which contain electricity flowing through them as kind of a replacement for blood that might burn them, so this creature uses that to help heal itself. I suppose that's all to say about this one. It's very small, but I wanted a little bit of a smaller creature for the environment, really flesh it out. And also I gave it some Pokemon stats, because, we're doing this in the Pokemon world. I might as well. Now, this last one is the Shieldrak, and it's a creature that hunts the Xurkitree. And I went down a bit of a rabbit hole with this one, so I'm not really going to talk for much longer, just mainly about its biology. I went into the biology of lots of snakes and bats for this one. It's largely like raptor-sized, definitely bigger than a human, just your classic kind of dragon thing. It's got these massive holes on its face called L'Oreal pits that snakes have, which they use for essentially their heat vision. Now, larger L'Oreal pits wouldn't necessarily be better, it's about their sensitivity. So, inside them, it's got hundreds of small little nerve endings that actually sprout almost directly off of this creature's brain. And it's got an extremely thin membrane. For example, if you cut into its face, you would almost immediately reach its brain. Obviously, it has a skull around it, but the skull is quite thin as well and not that protective. It has a skin membrane around its wings like a bat, and it will use updrafts from the clouds. So obviously you can tell, like I've been saying with the heat vision, it uses that heat vision to try and find Xurkitrees by seeing their heat signature. And you may wonder, well, if the entire planet is electric, wouldn't it all be extremely hot? You'd be right, but it flies underneath the thunderclouds, so it doesn't have to worry about that. And it hunts them in a special environment, which I'll talk about in a moment. But first we've got to talk about more of these creatures' organs. I do want to say before I dive further, a lot of this is speculative. Like, even with how much I've kind of buffed up the L'Oreal pits from actual snakes in this, it would still likely not be able to reach far enough for this to actually be plausible. But like I said at the start, we're just having a bit of fun here. Now, I wanted to give this creature as much brain power as possible to process its heat vision, because otherwise it just wouldn't really work. So it's got two brains, a bit similar to how people used to think Stegosauruses had. One in its head and one in its, backside. It's the one on its back controls its motor functions, while its limbs and stuff, and on its head controls its thoughts and the heat vision. The creature has a massive heart for its size, helping circulate blood a lot faster so more of it gets to the brain. It also has an esophagus that runs directly through the creature's spine to support itself. Now you may notice this sort of mane it has around it. These I know you think these would be bones, but no, they're more like teeth that grow from the side of these creatures' heads. See, since the head is so fragile and, weak, as I've already said, they fold these in over its head to protect it. Obviously, it needs its head uncovered to search for Xurkitrees, but after it's found them, it'll cover it up so the Xurkitrees have less chance of actually hurting it. You'll see it has got disconnected bones that aren't connected to each other to keep it light while flying, instead of being connected by the muscles. It hasn't got much, again, so more blood flow can get to the brain. It's sort of got thinner muscles that kind of blend in with the fat of the creature. So they don't even really count as muscles, they're kind of a blend between the two. But it has muscles connecting to its brain, so it hopefully shouldn't need much brain flow. And it has these extremely muscular arms compared to the rest of it to help with flight. And you maybe wonder, how come these things actually hunt Xurkitree? Wouldn't they be absolutely tranced by the Xurkitree's electricity? But you'd be right. While the calcium-like teeth protrusions aren't that damaged by it that protect the head, the rest of its body would be torn up. So that's why this creature kind of picks them apart. They'll rip out the wire-like creatures from the Xurkitree one by one to eat, using its specialised claws. And finally, how does this thing hunt them? If the entire planet is supercharged with electricity, it would all be super hot, right? Well, it hunts them in environments where a large variety, well not variety, but a large amount of Beetox go, where it's almost like a canyon, where it's like a desolate area where it's almost entirely made up of dried Beetox. But there's obviously still the wires there, but in that environment they don't have as much electricity. Leave a comment for the next gaming ecosystem you want to see in the series, and I'll see you guys in the next one.